That's the moment the Party for Socialism and Liberation says was inaudible in the critical incident video showing the police shooting that killed Adam Sykes.
Today we tell Mike Brown and the ruling class that we won't be divided. We've seen these tricks before. Immigrants are not dangerous. Capitalism is.
Welcome to Naptown People's Radio, a project of the Indianapolis branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm your host, Derek Ford, and filling in for Dani Abdullah is my comrade and guest co-host, Lucas Lee. We cover pressing issues facing the people of our city, spotlight stories that go untold by mainstream media outlets, and uplift the voices of workers, organizers, artists, and all people changing our city on a daily basis. We deliver news from our perspective, not the perspective of our oppressors. Moreover, as organizers, we're not just reporting the news, we're making it happen. So on today's episode, we're going to learn about an exciting new project that's launching today called MaskOff12. It has to do with basically taking away the anonymity that the killer cops in the city hide behind. We're also going to hear from James Kramer, a cultural worker in this city. But first, before we get into that, we have the Naptown Breakdown, and Lucas is going to cover that today. So what you got?
So early in the morning on the 3rd of January, the United States military conducted a surprise attack in Caracas, Venezuela. During this operation, the U.S. military bombed the city, killing civilians, whilst kidnapping Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the First Lady Cilia Flores. The two were later extradited to the United States, where they're being indicted under farcical charges. Trump and his administration ordered this operation in order to terrorize the Venezuelan people into giving up their oil to foreign capital interests. A secondary goal of this operation was to make an example out of the brave people who dare defy the United States empire, akin to similar actions taken in the past against states like Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Cuba. Trump went on Truth Social to claim that the United States would be taking back their oil fields, boldly stating that the Trump administration and its allied segment of the ruling class believe that they are entitled to Venezuela's national resources. He then went on to assert that the United States would be running Venezuela until further notice. But the situation in Venezuela with the ruling party still retaining control and resistance does not materially reflect that claim. While the operation, which involved extensive use of highly trained units with sophisticated equipment, is flashing and really intimidating, it's really more bark than bite. The choice of this operation over an outright full invasion of Venezuela just demonstrates that the United States empire is stretched and cannot exercise the same amount of force as it could in the past. This act of gangster imperialism, while pretty scary, failed to destroy the Bolivarian revolution and the will of the people of Venezuela to resist. If anything, it has further galvanized justified resistance against a dangerous aggressor. Outrage and resistance at the United States aggression was not only limited to Venezuela and the world. In the belly of the beast, within hours, Answer Coalition was planning anti-war demonstrations in hundreds of cities across the United States, including here in Indianapolis. And below freezing temperatures, dozens of people gathered on Monument Circle to protest and demonstrate in support of the sovereignty and self-determination of the people of Venezuela. Some of those in attendance took a moment with NPR to tell us why they stand for the people of Venezuela and why they stand against war. So let's take a moment to listen to what they have to say.
There shouldn't be a war anywhere. We shouldn't be bombing anybody. And these people have not asked for this. They have, even those who don't love their president. I'm not asking for some other country to come in here. So we have no right to be there.
All right. And where would you like our tax dollars to go to instead of war?
How about food, education, and health care? And daycare while you're at it.
I think it's important for us to honor sovereignty and the self-determination of other people. And when it comes to Venezuela, we have spent a lot of time and energy trying to control that area along with all these other nations in the global south. And I think it's really important that we vocalize and stand together that we don't represent and the people don't agree with this overstepping and overreach of what the people desire.
I would say it's important for Hoosiers to show up in Venezuela because this is just another example of the American empire flexing its strength to show that it's in charge in the world. And we know as empires fall, they like to lash out more and more. And so just look at a history book. We're at that time where this American empire is beginning to fall. And you need to look really closely because it's going to be at your doorstep any minute now.
So after listening to that, hopefully you can clearly see that there is a growing intolerance, not only for how the ruling class is oppressing us here in the United States, but how they are treating others across the globe. Hoosiers are starting to recognize that exploitation of us here and the attacks upon Venezuela bring nothing but harm to the working and oppressed people here and abroad. In fact, a majority of Americans disapprove of war with Venezuela. For all the dollars spent on expensive military equipment, training, and operations, we could be using that money to solve our most pressing problems here instead of using them to kill. With that money, combined with the power of the people, we could institute housing initiatives to end homelessness, like they have done in Venezuela. By using their national resources, namely oil, they use them to serve their most vulnerable, while in America, the profits of oil are only enjoyed by a small few. Keep in mind that the Bolivarian Revolution has accomplished these housing initiatives, among other projects, under constant brutal sanctions and U.S. aggression and interference. By seeking to control Venezuela's oil, the United States is trying to reverse all of these victories made for their working class. To summarize, Trump and his allied segment of the ruling class are not only seeking to take away our hard-earned victories here, but across the globe. This is why international solidarity is key, because we, as the working class, are ultimately fighting the same battles against the same enemy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true. I will say one thing, I was here on Saturday and it was just so inspiring because we were preparing for a study group of Capital, and at the same time, we were printing and making placards for the protests. And then right after the study group, we, went to the protest, which was a very large, I would say over 60 people were there, which is really significant for Indianapolis. In 2019, when, they tried to install Juan Guaido as president, I think the largest demonstration that we had was ultimately about 60 people. And this is just the very first one. So it's definitely a sign of changed consciousness. And then, the next day there was a Liberation Flix about data centers. And then we had emancipatory motions at the ILC. So it really just makes me, appreciate this space and what this physical infrastructure allows us to do. I think that the U.S. empire is weak. It's probably weaker than it's been in, over a century, I think, really. And that manifests itself as violence, but also, it's not just the unmatched military power, right? It's also the political power of the people here and in Venezuela. So, contrary to what was, it's been told to us, 32 Cubans, soldiers gave their lives, defending President Maduro. And the Venezuelan military hasn't fractured. The people are armed, they're mobilized, and that's why I agree, like international solidarity is key. And what does that mean though? Because it's one thing to be like, yes, we're with you. But having been to, other countries, right? And hearing people talk about actually how remarkable it is and how inspiring it is for them to see people in the U.S. paying attention to what they're facing and what they're subjected to by the U.S., how it keeps them going, right? And so even if it's not as if we're materially supporting, the defense of the Bolivarian Revolution, by sending like money or something or helping to feed the people, right? They're seeing these demonstrations and they are like, it's hardening their will to ultimately like win. And the other thing I'm thinking about is just how absurd it is, like Benjamin Netanyahu's just walking around. I mean, come on.
Yeah, literally like one of the most reviled people globally, and he's just allowed to go wherever he wants. But like we have our president quite literally just trampling on any resemblance of like a stability of international law and kidnapping a leader of a sovereign country, and it's just allowed to do that.
Yeah. Also
charging him under American like laws about like possessing weapons and stuff. It's just complete like farce. It's like it's a complete show.
It is. And I think that's why people can see through it so easily. I mean, not only just imagine if the shoe was on the other foot, like imagine if like Maduro sent the, Venezuelan army, sent like a, mercenary group in the U.S. to kidnap the U.S. president, which, I mean, most people probably support, honestly. Bring him back to Venezuela, charge him under Venezuelan law, and lock him away, right? I mean, it's not like all like metaphors or whatever. It's not perfect because, as I said, I think a lot of people would support that. Mm. But regardless, like in this situation, like I mean, the U.S. has done it before, with Noriega, and it's like it's just disgusting. I remember learning about that and being like, wait, what? Like, how could the U.S. do that? Of course, Noriega didn't, was collaborating with the CIA before, didn't have the popular support, but like, you can't do, like, I think like everybody in the world knows like that is not okay. Like, you can't just kidnap a president.
Yeah, just like baseline, it is like fundamentally like something that you do not do.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like how is this? I mean, but then again, what is the like international law, like legal order, right? I mean, who sets that up? It's basically whatever the U.S. says. And that's being challenged now. And that's why we need to be in the streets saying like, you're not doing this in our name. We stand with, President Maduro and the legitimate elected government of Venezuela and thereby all the Venezuelan people.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, with that, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. And welcome back to Naptown People's Radio. We are honored to be joined by two organizers involved in a very exciting and important new project that is unleashing today, MaskOff12.com. We have with us Dani Abdullah, whose last name might sound familiar to listeners, in addition to being the husband of my co-host, Dani Abdullah. He is a member of the community who's been involved in the police struggle for almost a year. We also have Noah Leininger, a teacher and an organizer with Answer Indiana, who's been organizing against IMPD terror for 7 years. And there are not many organizers in this city who have been doing that kind of work for that long. So I imagine, Akeem, that you've learned a lot from Noah.
Yeah, I've actually learned quite a lot from Noah. I appreciate his leadership skills and just his ability to teach me all of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we said this before on the show, but for a very long time, the city thought that Noah was a lawyer.
The cops.
The cops in particular, yeah. Just because, and I will say this because it's germane to this conversation, but they try to like kicking us and preventing us from doing outreach at the bus stop because there's private property. And so Noah pulls up the Indigo map and then the public map and sends a letter to the sheriff. And we have a letter from the sheriff now saying you can do outreach here. So that leads us to the website, right? Because the website is MaskOff12, which I imagine to be unveiling or like unmasking the cops, right, in this city. Is it all cops in the city? Can you, Akeem, can you talk a little bit about the sort of like a broad overview of the project?
For me, the best way to describe it is just an accountability tool for the police in this city, for members of the community to look up specific officers via name, via badge number, and their record, essentially. You can find out if somebody has a use of force record, how many times they've had that put on their record. Noah's done a great job on the website just breaking down even racial statistics and gender statistics, and even sometimes age as well. Just things that we need to know to just uncover patterns of violence throughout the city.
And so those patterns of violence are, of course, disturbing enough to warrant a website.
In my opinion, most definitely so. There are plenty of cases where, specifically on the state's website, where they have their own version of some sort of accountability, which I don't really think is very apt and descriptive of what they did, that you can look up an incident but not look up whatever the officer has done in the past. So it gives a veil of anonymity and just a veil of, like, they feel like it's a one-off incident, like as in, oh, this cop did this one time and they have beat up somebody one time. When in reality, we know if somebody beats somebody up on the force, they usually have beaten somebody up or are going to beat somebody up again.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that, if we could. On November 21st of last year, Mirror Indy ran an article with the headline, "New IMPD Transparency Tool Makes Police Data Available to Public." And we have our police chief, Chris Bailey, speaking at a public meeting about it. So does this render MaskOff12 redundant, Noah? Or what exactly is the function? Why do you think the IMPD took this initiative? And then two, what are the differences? Because I imagine there are many between this and MaskOff12.
Definitely. So, I mean, the reason behind IMPD creating their website, and they call it the IMPD Transparency Hub.
Can you talk about why they might call it that?
Absolutely. So in 2019 into 2020, there was a project called IMPD Transparency, which was not affiliated with the police, that was in some respects similar to the MaskOff12 website that we're launching, where it was a list of all the police officers, how much they were getting paid, and that was generated through public records requests that were made to the city. The tool that IMPD came out with, that they called their Transparency Hub, doesn't really do that. I mean, they combine a lot of different things into this so-called Transparency Hub, but it's really not transparent. They have crime statistics, traffic statistics, and what they call professional standards, which is what we call, the bulk of MaskOff12. That's the violence that IMPD officers are inflicting on the community. So on MaskOff12.com, you can go in and see by officer how many times they have brutalized people in our community, the ages, the genders, like Akeem was saying. On the IMPD Transparency Hub, it's all collected into one just big aggregate. So for 2024, for example, on the IMPD Transparency Hub, it says that there were 3,079 uses of force, and that's it. We can't go in and see which officers did anything. We can't see what kind of force they used, which is a grotesque euphemism, right? Like a use of force is a use of violence against people, but they don't have that on their so-called Transparency Hub. They're just letting people know, hey, in 2024, there were 3,000 uses of force. In 2025, according to the website, and I'm looking at it right now, there were 1,400 uses of force. So they, according to their website, they halved the violence in 2025. And then 2026 year to date, there's no data yet. But if you go to MaskOff12, you can see that that's all just a crock. In 2026, there have been several incidents already. Those are already up on MaskOff12. In 2025, I guarantee you, we don't have the same panel that the police do. We don't have the same layout of our information, but I guarantee you that 2025 was not half as violent from the police as 2024 was.
So basically, the IMPD, classic fashion, ripped off the name of a grassroots sort of effort, and then sanitized it completely to make themselves look good in an effort to, placate the like murder spree they went on in 2023.
Yeah. And they use that name because that name was known in the community. And so if you go on your search engine and you type in IMPD transparency, trying to find information about the cops, they know that that's what people were searching for. So that's why they use that name. So their site is the one that comes up.
Interesting. Yeah. And it seems very troubling to not disaggregate uses of force or show of force, right? Which is, what is a cop is a show of force to me. Like when a cop comes up to me, he's showing force, right?
And they got a gun.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and Hakeem, do you have anything to add in terms of the differences?
For me, their website is just not user friendly. Like if you want to say it's transparent, why can't we just look officers up? Why is everything boiled down to the incident itself, especially for police force? It's as well as their accountability section of it as well. Not very user friendly as well, because they don't have the ability to search things specifically. You were just lobbing it up to just one specific incident this one time from this one officer. And from there, it is up to the user to research everything and put things together for themselves. With our website, we've kind of done the work for the community.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but I don't exactly have hours and hours and hours I don't even know where to look for a lot of this information to put it together.
Everybody says they're proficient in Excel, but nobody's really proficient in Excel.
I was just going to say I am kind of proficient, but no. No. So the other thing is I'm wondering what triggered this, because our community has experienced the traumatic loss of lives by killer cops in the IMPD, the sheriffs. They're all the same. That's what I mean by cops. Was there sort of a specific incident that triggered this, or was there a galvanizing factor?
And I think the immediate inspiration for the website was the brutal attack by several police officers this summer of Devin Hunt that was captured on multiple different videos showing from different angles before the police showed up, all the way through their brutal and disgusting attack on Devin and their arrest of him. And the cops turned around and that weekend said, social media is blowing up talking about this incident, but everyone's got it wrong. He was trying to flee. He was swinging his arms. He was trying to punch these cops, when everybody who could see a video could see that the cops were just brazenly lying about it. So we put out a statement about it as, one of the other organizations, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, put out a reel showing, step by step. Here's what the cops said. Here's what actually happened. And so that was one factor. Another factor, thinking back to the history of it, in 2020, when IMPD murdered 3 people in the span of just 8 hours. They murdered Drejon Reed the afternoon of May 6th, and then the night and early morning hours into the 7th, they murdered Mikhail Rose and Ashlyn Lisby and her fetus, that was her child.
Yeah, and just to chime in there, because it was Ashlyn Lisby died, but the child was born and then died.
That's right.
So it was for 4 people.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. So 4 people in the span of 8 hours. In some of the discussions and conversations, they go out into the community and say, we're going to be better. And I remember there was a meeting at the Indianapolis Urban League where then Chief Taylor showed up and was talking about how, we're going to, be better about this. And I posed a question to him of, are you tracking the violence that your officers are committing against people by race, by gender? And he said no. And in the same conversation, he was talking about, we're putting this new accountability portal on the back end, not one of the public ones that we can access, but for the police to have access to. We're gonna see who we need to intervene early with this officer because of some data that they're not sharing with us. And so I asked him, are you tracking the use of force, the violence that your officers are committing based on race and gender? And they said no. And the fact that they aren't doing that tells me a lot, right? They obviously could because we did it, and we don't have all the data that they do. So that tells me that they are okay with the fact that if you go onto almost any officer's profile on MaskOff12, the percentage of their violence that is unleashed against Black people is way higher than the percentage of violence that they unleash against white people or Asian people. And that doesn't comport with the number of Black people that live in Indianapolis. Black folks make up about 30% of Indianapolis, but it's a super majority of the violence that these cops are unleashing. And if they cared about this, they would do something about it, but they don't.
Yeah, and also I like that his response was, we're going to be better. So it's like what? Okay, you're going to kill 2 people in 8 hours next year? What does that mean, doing better? And also, isn't the only way to prevent an officer who is has or displayed tendencies to use force against our people, to brutalize or terrorize or kill our people, to fire them?
It should be.
Absolutely, it should be. And, that raises an important case study, right? If you look on MaskOff12.com, you can look up officers by the number of people that they've killed. And the highest number that any IMPD officer, at least in the current data set, has killed 3 people. And that officer is named Javed Richards. He is the deadliest officer on IMPD's payroll, and he's currently suspended, not because he is the most violent pig on the force, but because he is facing federal charges for possession of child porn and all of that. So not only is he this exceptionally violent and murderous officer who should have been taken off the force, like Akeem said, fired this guy. They kept him on the force so that he could kill again and again. And the only reason that they have taken his badge and gun away temporarily, he's still on the force, is because he's facing these federal charges.
And he has the rank of a sergeant, and he makes $96,000 a year, at least in 24 he did. And he has, 22 uses of force against Black people.
Out of 37. So that's 60% of his violence is against Black people, which
is proportionate.
That's twice as many as the population.
And then I see here that you can go into details, and then I can see exactly, civilian, right? A 43-year-old Black man who police said was quote unquote non-compliant, right? A 41-year-old white man, 14, Jordan Bull. Oh wait, these are the cops that he is conspired with to kill.
So when you go in to an officer's profile, you can click into the details like you're talking about and see the details of all of the violence they've unleashed, at least that the cops have told us about. Now, for some officers, we don't have that because they don't come out and say Javed Richards did all of these things. They put out data sets that say, okay, officer number 4021 did these things. And because of the data that we've accumulated, that we've been sent by some other organizations working around police transparency, we've been able to match these officers with their numbers, at least some of them. We've requested, just like these other transparency organizations have done, we've requested updated information from IMPD through the Indiana Access to Public Records Act, and they've been dragging their feet. We requested this information earlier this year. They know this website exists, and it's because they know this website exists and they don't want us to tell the public how violent their pigs are, that they are not giving that information over to us. So what you're seeing when you go into the incident details, all of the cops that are involved in any particular incident, which they could obviously do on their website, and then all of the civilians that were brutalized or in some cases killed by the police. And you can see how long these officers were in IMPD, what their role in the police department was, and details about the person that they brutalized. You know, you can see their age, their race, what the police said that they were up to, and just how much violence was inflicted against them.
And I'm looking at a February 9, 2019 incident with this pedophile cop in which a 31-year-old white man who police said was, quote unquote, resisting arrest, which is like an impossible charge because he wasn't arrested. You know, like how can you resist arrest unless you're arresting me for something? But regardless, police documented the following violence against him. Officer Richards, less lethal taser found in compliance, less lethal taser by Stewart found in compliance, physical kick by Brett Buscema found in compliance. So these officers were not injured and they were found in compliance for kicking and tasing somebody.
Yeah, you actually have to search far and wide to find any violence that is not in compliance with IMPD's protocols. Almost every single time they use violence against people, they investigate themselves and they come back and say, this was okay. We did it by the book.
This reminds me of a case for Officer Brian Etheridge in 2021. He had shot somebody who was unarmed. And that person, yet again, how we were talking about earlier with just a pattern of violence, had 131 just cases of use of force on his record. And majority of them are either written verbal warnings, which don't do anything to help the community at all. So it's just a noticeable pattern of violent police in the city, just being able to do so because everything is compliant and everything is on board with IMPD in general.
Yeah. And so when you go to the website, I love that you can scroll by uses of force, people killed, and then compensation. So I'm looking at the highest compensated officer for 2024. And it looks like I'm not the best with technology, so I may need some help here. But it looks like it's Carlos Pettiford. Mm-hmm. He's a patrol officer. His title is Traffic Enforcement Officer, Cycles. So is he a bike cop?
Not bicycle, but motorcycle.
Okay. Oh, motorcycle. Oh, great. Let's give this guy a motorcycle. So he's got 27 total documented uses of force, over 21 documented quote unquote incidents. And again, 44%, 33% against Black people. So he's making he's making almost like $250K a year. And he's out just brutalizing people.
And I think it's interesting that he's the highest paid cop. I mean, he's paid, I think like twice as much as Chief Bailey is.
And he started in 2015.
Right. So that shows you the priorities of the police in another way, right? Like the police are clearly not here to protect us because they're out here brutalizing us. But the city pays these cops exorbitantly. I mean, you introduced me as a teacher. I've never seen a teacher get paid over $100,000, let alone over $200,000. But the highest paid cop is not someone who is helping people. The highest paid cop is not a homicide investigator or a sex crimes investigator trying, whenever people talk about defunding the police, the thing that we hear in response is, oh, well, what are you going to do about murderers? What are you going to do about rapists? They're not paying those people the highest. They're paying someone who's out there pulling you over and giving you a ticket. The kind of cop that nobody likes. That's the highest paid cop. And I think that's something interesting that people can find diving into this website.
Yeah, and it reminds me also of I think it was August 6th or 8th when the IMPD murdered Baby G, Gary Harrell, as he was slowly walking away from them, and rightfully so, because he knew that there was a killer cop after him, and that cop did kill him. And that cop, Douglas Carell, was put on paid vacation, and he eventually, I think, left because that's what happens when these cops, they just sort of go to another department someplace else, I believe, right? Do you know what happened to Carell?
Off the top of my head, no, I don't. I know he's not with IMPD anymore, but I don't know where he ended up.
Yeah, he's probably working with ICE. I wouldn't be surprised if he got a good job, but they recruited him. ICE recruited him because that's who they're looking for. But yeah, I mean, they're put on paid vacation, and I looked, and then looking into it more and realizing that this guy brutalized a black man. This black man's neighbor called for help because the black man was shot in the foot. And Carell and his partner walk past him as he's crying, like, hey, help me. They start to enter his property, and he says, hey, I don't give you permission to do that. Help me. And Carell picks him up and knees him, crushes his spleen, puts him in the hospital. And the city settled the case for something like over $200,000 to keep him on the street so he could kill Baby G.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wait, there's no money for schools. There's no money for buses. There's no money to fix the potholes, but you're putting all this money to keep these killer cops on the streets?
Not only to keep the killer cops on the street, but with the budget increase, hire more, which is something that the IMPD hasn't been able to do and fulfill their own role of hiring, 1,700 officers on the force. They have not been able to meet that goal at all, but they still get paid as if they are going to meet that set goal. So they are wasting money from the taxpayer itself to hire people who are going to, yet again, and abuse us.
And that's part of the collective bargaining agreement that they have with the so-called union, the Fraternal Order of Police.
Which is not a union, just to be clear.
Yeah, not a workers' union anyway.
Yeah.
They have this agreement between the city and the FOP that says that the city of Indianapolis has to fund IMPD as if they have every single officer staffed, when they are routinely coming out to the media and saying, hey, we're, several hundred officers short. They could, if that agreement wasn't there with the city, they could turn around and use that money for all kinds of different programs. I mean, the number of potholes all over the city could be reduced with that money. Schools could be, improved. Instead, the city is destroying schools. So you see where the priorities of the political establishment, which, in the city of Indianapolis, that's the Democratic Party. They have supermajority control. They are using that power to fund the police and fund the police more.
Yeah. And, it was just January 6th that Indy Star ran an article about how violent crime, which, is also quite a broad category. It doesn't include most of the violence that happens in our community, like homelessness and, the poverty and whatnot, but
police violence.
Yeah, police violence, right? But how the headline is Indianapolis violent crime in 2025 ticked down. Police data shows. So, despite a year where violent crime in Indianapolis captured national headlines on more than one occasion, overall the city saw a decrease in both homicides and non-fatal shootings. So, how is it that obviously the cops aren't the result? This is not the result of the police doing anything.
I mean, if you listen to the police, though, they're taking credit for this. Chief Bailey at the budget hearing in the city county council was, congratulating his officers for reducing crime in the city, when that's obviously not true by their own numbers. One of the things that actually is useful about the IMPD Transparency Hub that the police themselves put out is that they put out these annual reports. And in those annual reports, you can see how many different cases of different types the police were called out for. So they have information about like how many times they were called out for a homicide, how many times they were called out for a robbery. And along with that, they have how many times they cleared those cases, whether they cleared the case by arresting somebody and charging them of the crime, or they cleared it for exceptional reasons. And these are police terms that real people don't use. To put it into like terms that people can understand, an exceptional cleared case means that like the police either don't have enough evidence to take to the prosecutor and get someone charged, or witnesses won't cooperate, or, they aren't doing their job. They don't have the information that they need to actually say, hey, this is the person who did it. They should face some kind of accountability.
Right. Or they aren't looking for that information at all.
Right.
I mean, what other job? I mean, can you imagine like any other job where you can just shoot somebody and kill them, and then you get put on paid vacation, you don't get arrested, you don't have to talk to the police. And in fact, you get like several days before you talk to the police. Right. So that you can get your story straight with all your other killer cop buddies, right? And then you finally give your statement once it's all, you match it up. And then it's given to the, prosecutor who always convenes a grand jury, right? With the information that the police have gathered and gotten from themselves, their own officers. And then it's no wonder why we don't see these officers indicted, let alone like even grand juries being convened.
Yeah, I mean, the grand juries are a great way for the prosecution to wash their hands of this. Prosecutor Mears does not need to convene a grand jury. Under Indiana law, you don't need to have a grand jury to charge somebody with a felony. There are some places where you do need that. Indiana isn't one of them. So if Ryan Mears wanted to charge a killer cop for murder, he could do it. And like you said, like if I took a gun out and shot somebody in public, they don't need to convene a grand jury. They would come to my house, they would arrest me, I would be in jail. And that's not what happens with the cops.
And that's the function of their quote unquote union, right?
Yeah.
Which shows you the difference in a real union, because a real union would be like, hey, if we got somebody who's killing people, like that's not okay. You know, like yes.
And as a teacher, I'm in my union. I'm in the teachers union. And one thing that is astonishing is no teachers union would be able to defend the kind of results that IMPD gets. Going back just briefly to the, cases cleared exceptionally or by arrest, they really rely on exceptionally cleared cases to say that they are doing their jobs. If you include all of those cases, well, then 30% of aggravated assault, half of homicide cases are cleared when you include these cases that are being cleared because they say they don't have enough information. When you take that out, only 16% of aggravated assault cases are being cleared with the police arresting somebody. Now, I'm not saying that when the police arrest somebody, one, that it's a good thing, two, that they've arrested the correct person, or three, I'm not accepting the premise that that is actual justice. But these are the arguments they are making to the community, and with their own data and their own arguments, they paint a picture that's actually very, grotesque. 43% of child abuse cases are cleared with an arrest, 9% of sex offenses. So when we go out and we say, hey, we should defund the police, take that money and use it for programs that would actually help the people of Indianapolis, and somebody turns around and says, well, what about the rapists? They're only arresting 9% of the people who commit sex offenses anyway. So they're clearly not doing the job. Let's take the money away and do something else with it.
because that's what happens to every other institution. I'm just thinking, like, I also work at a school, and like, if my student opinion surveys and my scholarship like remain the same and continue to decline, and get worse, I wouldn't get a raise.
Right.
Like, if a school's test scores like keep dropping and dropping, they're not getting more money, which actually they should, because it means they need more funding, right?
Absolutely.
But it's like the exact opposite. It's like, wait, why don't you close police stations if they're not doing their job?
Right.
If they're not getting the results that we want.
And not only in education, right? Like, not only do we have to always, we can't just like hold steady. We have to be growing. If we're holding steady in education, that's a failure. If the police get worse, they get more money. With the police, you can really see how the government has its priorities and they aren't our priorities. The ruling class needs this armed, oppressive instrument to keep working and oppress people subjected to, daily violence, daily deprivations, just depravity.
Yeah.
Horrific treatment. And they can't take that away. They can't have a society where working and oppressed people don't have that suppression, because then we might come together and build a better world. We might come together and imagine a new society.
Exactly. Yes. And that's ultimately the function of police and prisons in the United States, right? Is to not only contain the most explosive, populations, right? Like the unemployed, the oppressed, and the exploited, the dispossessed, but also to prevent them from becoming politicized, to put them, I don't even use the term school to prison pipeline, because today's schools function like prisons. Most people have their first contact with a cop in school.
I did.
Yeah. You did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At Pike.
At Pike?
We had a police station, or like a little mini station unit at Pike. Like, it's in like a two-way glass. It was wild.
Was it a school resource officer or?
They call them resource officers.
Okay.
They still snatch people up and throw them against walls.
Yep.
I taught at a school that's located in the building where IPS police headquarters is. And a fight broke out at this school. And like, the students had pepper spray, and that was being sprayed in the hallway. There was a pregnant student who was punched in the stomach. And it took about 15 minutes for IPS police to show up in the same building. And then when they did come into the building, they stood around and did nothing for another 7 minutes before IMPD officers arrived and started to, take some of these students into custody. I'm not saying that's the right way to handle this situation, but again, the police don't do anything to keep people safe.
Yeah. Although I will say, shout out to the director of diversity and inclusion for the IMPD, John Hackett Walton. He makes $117,000 last year, at least. And he has only one documented use of force against a black man. So obviously he's a great choice for diversity and inclusion.
He's making sure to include black men in police violence.
Exactly. It's unbelievable. This website, it's really quite impressive. And as you can tell, I'm like exploring it as we're doing this, and I'm looking forward to getting into it more. And I have a lot of questions I want to ask about, how you got this information, what it took, and and I know it wasn't just you two, of course. There was a team working on it. I imagine it will be updated regularly.
Yeah. So this information comes from public records requests made to IMPD. So we can update it as often as they get us the information. I have made the most recent round of requests to IMPD back in June. It is now January of the following year, and I'm still waiting on those records.
So in other words, one way that we obtain this information, it's by submitting the paperwork, but there needs to be a show of force, if you will, behind the paperwork.
Right. I mean, exactly. The law says that public entities, government entities, have a reasonable time to respond to public records requests.
Unless there's exceptional circumstances.
Right. And the law does not define what reasonable time is, and the courts haven't really defined what reasonable time is. It's very much a case-by-case thing. And so the only way that we can get the information that we need is by just continuously pestering IMPD's legal team, saying, hey, it's been another month. We haven't gotten this information. And then they send a couple more PDFs our way. Hey, it's been another month. Where is this information? And they, say, oh, well, we'll check into that and get back to you.
Yeah. And I mean, if any of our listeners, please do leave a comment if you think that 6 months is reasonable, a reasonable time frame for like responding to an email. I mean, I'm terrible at email, but I'll get back to you within 6 months, with what you want.
And as a teacher, right, like if a parent emails me, my principal expects that within 24 hours I've responded to that parent.
Yeah,
6 months?
I think the respectable turnaround time for most just jobs in general is like 48 hours to be fair for anything, for any response. So at my job, if I don't respond in 2 days, somebody's calling me.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hopefully not calling the cops on you.
Depends on the job. That's
So public records requests are one source of the data. Another source of the data is Indy, the city of Indianapolis's own data website, data.indy.gov. They have some information about use of force, officer-involved shootings, and other IMPD data. But what's interesting is that just like we've been waiting for responses to record requests that we put back in June, as soon as IMPD realized that this website was in the making, they shut off the flow of some of that data. Really? So officer-involved shootings. Really. Officer-involved shootings used to be updated daily. And if you go to their own transparency hub, it still says, oh, these data sources are updated daily. But that's very obviously not true. And there's one easy way that you can check that. If you go to data.indy.gov and you look up the IMPD officer-involved shooting data set, and look for the most recent IMPD shooting where they went down to Franklin, Indiana, not even in Marion County. It's outside of their jurisdiction. And they shot and killed a guy in a semi-truck cab. That data is not there because they don't want us to have the data to know who those cops were. Now they're hiding behind, they say, whenever something like this happens and they don't want to tell the community what happened, they hide behind this just lie of officer safety. As if there has ever been a case in Indianapolis history where the people of Indianapolis have heard the name of a cop who murdered somebody and went out and did something foolish about it. The people of Indianapolis want these names so that we can say to the leaders of Indianapolis, fire this guy, put this guy in jail. Nobody's going to treat these officers unsafely. They're using that as a lie so that they can hide that information. And that's the whole idea behind MaskOff12 is take away this anonymity, take away this thin blue line protecting them, and let the community know who is policing their streets.
Yeah, because we have a right to know. And so, I mean, I guess that, I want to keep talking about this, but we do have other segments. But I want to close out with this. This is to both of you, which is really, what function do you want this to serve in our community? And how can people utilize this?
For me personally, I'd like to see it just as a general accountability tool. I think people who get pulled over or get roughed up, you have access to that information that you can look up your officer who assaulted you. You can see that this person has a pattern of assault. And then obviously, if you want to, you can call us and then we can talk about it for you or help you out if need be. But just in general, a tool for the public in general.
Yeah. And that makes me think actually I have a traffic court thing I'm supposed to go to. And, I can look up that cop and maybe just pull up his records and introduce that into evidence.
I mean, I'm sure the courts will do everything they can to keep that out, but you should. The last time I was pulled over, the cop gave me a ticket, and on the ticket actually said that I was black, which tells you everything you need to know about what these cops are looking for. But that cop actually is, looking him up, he's got 40% of his violence is against women, which is kind of exceptional. Most of these cops are unleashing violence predominantly against men in the city. I wonder what this cop is doing that 40% of his violence is against women.
Yeah, and I think that the other function this should serve is, I want to know who's policing my community. And now I have a tool where I can go and find that out. And, what I'd like to do is inform my neighbors about it, because that's the next step always, right? It's like, this website is, I'm sure it's a lot of work. It was a lot of work, I'm sure, to construct. It'll be a lot of work to keep updated, especially if, we have to be hounding the cops for publicly available information, or what should be publicly available information. But, if there's a killer cop in my community, or a cop who's committed, 50% of their, 100 uses of force, against women, I want their name and their picture to be distributed, so that to watch out for this person. This person is dangerous. If you see them, turn around. If you see them, call me, call us, right? Because that's there's no stranger danger, right? People aren't being assaulted by people lurking in the bushes and homeless people, right? They're being assaulted by these people who have names and they have badge numbers, and they're being protected by the state.
Because they do the work of the state. It's if they weren't doing the work of the state, if they weren't I like mafia movies. If they weren't the, gun thugs that are out there while Don Corleone is in his big mansion, he's got these guys going out into the streets, beating people up, shooting people. Joe Hogsett, right, is not going out and doing this work himself, but he's got himself a very nice and very large and very well-paid gang, the most violent and most dangerous gang in the city, to do that work for him.
Yeah, specifically wrangling up homeless people and harassing them and telling them to get out the city.
Yeah. Anytime some big corporation or event that could bring in tourists and tourist dollars, the NBA Finals, the Super Bowl, Gen Con, any of these big events, the city of Indianapolis unleashes these cops and doesn't do anything to solve the issue of homelessness, just moves the issue out of sight, because that's the best that they can do with the people who are in power and the political class that's in power.
Yeah, just to conclude, the way that I always talk about it is, if I was evicted once, right? And I remember, the landlord came and with the sheriff and deputies, and we were on the third, fourth floor of this, house, and just threw all our stuff out, onto the front lawn, basically right across from a hospital in Baltimore. And, we had to get U-Haul and whatever. But, there was no hot water in my apartment. And it didn't even occur to me, because it wouldn't do anything. I can't call the cops and be like, hey, my landlord isn't turning on my hot water, which is right, which I'm paying, I'm paying rent, right? And so they're not I can't call them and go to his house and show up with the police and the sheriff say, hey, come here and fix this dude's water. Mm-hmm. And that really shows you who the police serve, which is the landlords, not the tenants. It's the owners. It's not the workers.
It's the Simon family and the the Pacers, not the people who make the city run.
Yeah, if I get fired and they have to kick me out of my job, they're not going to come back and be like, well, you stole time from this guy and you should give him his last paycheck with all that time you stole from him and his labor. Like, no, they're just like, here's a box and don't even look at the door.
That's right. Yeah. And wage theft is like, the most common form of theft, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, that is, somewhat of a disheartening note to leave it on, but also it's an empowering note to leave it on because we have this information and because you're standing up. And I think it's a bold act. It is a bold act to stand up to these cops and take their masks off. We know who you are. You can't hide from us with these, whatever reasonable excuses and mitigating circumstances, right? All their sort of mumbo jumbo. We know who you are. We have a website. We can find out about you. We can look up your history, just like you can look up our history, right? I mean, fair's fair. Yeah. I mean, they can look up my record, right? I mean, my record's online, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the cops know who I am. Like, I've been doing this work in the city for 7 years now. The cops know who I am. They know where I live. If something happens, be in the streets.
Yeah. But, the way that we protect ourselves is through numbers, I mean, I know that you're not afraid of that because you know that there will be people in the streets, I mean, we work with many victims of police terror and false imprisonment, false incarceration, and like one in particular I work with, it's like every time he goes into the PO office, he's like, every time he walks out, it's like, man, I'm free again. Like, it's like my first day out of jail again, out of prison again, because they can always just arrest him for whatever. But he knows now that, like, if that happens, that there are going to be people in the streets and they're not going to get away with it. People aren't going to be silent about it because they're going to know about it. And we're going to know about it. People and our listeners will know about it. And we'll know who these cops are. We'll look them up, because that really is their safety in numbers. And the only way to protect ourselves against this incredibly well-paid, incredibly well-protected, incredibly well-armed gang is to unite across class, across race, across gender, across all identity and all differences in backgrounds. And that's the only way that we can, protect ourselves. But ultimately the goal is to create a new system where, like stealing $5 isn't a crime that you will be sent to jail for, right? But rather stealing, trillions of dollars like they did in 2007, 2008, that is a crime that you can go to jail for.
When working people finally get political power and can use that to set the outlines of what society looks like, we won't need 1,700 cops roaming the streets of Indianapolis because that isn't what keeps us safe. That's not necessary. It's only necessary in a system where a very small clique of billionaires who can only continue their power through massive violence. That's the kind of system that needs police. When workers have power, it'll be a very different situation.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's actually a sign of weakness that they need so many cops, because if you have a system that people consent to, you don't need a bunch of cops killing people to enforce the rules, right? Like, Absolutely. If you have actually a just system with just laws, right? You don't need cops because people are just, people are humane, except for these cops. So anyways, thank you so much, Akeem, Noah, for your work on this, for being on this show. It's been a really enlightening conversation, enlightening to our listeners for sure. I'm sure we'll get a lot of inquiries about this. And I'll be using this website. I might not get to bed tonight till pretty late because I'll be on it. Everybody else, I really encourage you to, because this exposes just exactly how corrupt and what bold-faced lies they tell, really. So yeah, thank you both for being on the show, and hopefully we'll have you back again to to hear how the project is progressing.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
All right, and with that, we'll be right back. You're listening to Naptown People's Radio. Welcome back to Naptown People's Radio. We are honored to be joined by James Kramer, a lifelong Hoosier, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah.
All right,
yeah,
pretty much.
Say that.
All right, more or less. And a longtime Indianapolis resident and engaged community member. Worked at Butler University for a while, works in the performing arts, currently is a member of the IATSE Union, and just finished helping out with the run of the wonderful Symphony Christmas special.
Yuletide celebration.
All right. So, and James is also a big supporter of the Liberation Center. And so we have always valued his input, his contributions, and of course, financial and otherwise. Whenever I see him, I often see him in a center shirt, and that means a lot. So yeah, James, can you tell us about the Christmas special, how it went this year?
Oh, it was fantastic. Fantastic. I think attendance-wise, it was really very popular. A lot of people make that their holiday tradition. So they come back year after year, and now it's been running, I guess, about 34 years. So a lot of people are coming with their kids, sharing the kind of experience they had when they were children. So it's a real holiday tradition for a lot of families. Quality-wise, I mean, it was just an explosion of holiday music and holiday color and joy and all sorts of wonderful things. Yeah. So it was very popular. I actually heard from a few people in person after they came that it was really their favorite one yet. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you've had a range of experiences, or rather have this line of work in particular has put you into contact with a range of very diverse folks.
Oh yeah.
So some famous, more famous than others, at least too. So
we don't drop names, but when we talk about Madonna
on the show,
or
we do.
Taylor Swift or John Legend or Frankie Valli, in terms of big solo artists, and then a lot of others are in names within big shows, whether they're Wicked or Les Mis, Phantom of the Opera, Lion King, those kind of shows. So, it's a real nice varied work behind the scenes.
Who's the most famous person that you've ever touched? Or dressed or undressed?
James says wardrobe, I always like to say that I was one arm's distance away from Madonna at the Super Bowl halftime show. What we're now like 14 years ago.
Okay.
That was
I'd ride that wave.
Yeah. So, and that's pretty much, I think most people still have that name recognition. Not too many people are going, Madonna, who?
Or Frankie Valli. I'm like, sounds like my grandma.
Yeah.
Neat. Yeah. And what do you think? Indianapolis, it seems to me, is situated in an interesting space because we're close to Chicago.
Yeah.
Which is where all the big time performers go. And then, do they often pass through here?
Sometimes that is. It's a routing thing. When they're scheduling tours, they try not to be so far flung. It's a balance. One, you don't want to have too many shows in the same area where you might saturate and then you kind of cut into your audience.
Right.
But at the same time, if you've got a big following, people will follow you from Dayton to Cincy to Indy to St. Louis to Louisville in that area, So it's a balance. They have to look at what makes sense economically for the travel. Mm-hmm. Does it make more sense for us to stay here in the area? Or does it make sense for us to go from here, go to New York, then come back to Tennessee, and then go to Missouri, and then come back to Indy, kind of thing. It's those are the number people. Those are the people that aren't necessarily artistic ones, but they're looking at the practical numbers and their accountants and all those business types that say, what's going to make us the most money? What's going to sell the most tickets? What's going to give us the most? And so that's that business side of it, aside from, what about the show? How is it
Right.
going to entertain people? Well, that's a given. You know that they're going to give a good show. So.
Right. Now, if you do know any of those business types, if you could pass them my card,
sure.
that would be
Absolutely.
fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we've got to
Okay,
take
great.
this show
Thank
on the
you.
road, right?
Well, yeah. And also we need money. So,
Well, there's that too.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Always.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it makes sense that those would be two sides of the same business. They would sometimes go together quite well. Sometimes I'm sure clash.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's performers who would be perfectly happy performing to a crowd of 50, right? Those intimate shows that I've been to have sometimes been the best ones, right? Cool.
I've worked with some of the artists who said they really appreciated. They were stadium artists. They had grown to that point, but they said we really love being able to be in a venue where it feels more intimate, to actually connect with the audience and to be able to have that fine acoustics that sometimes larger venues don't provide.
Yeah.
A stadium, a field house, those kind of things just aren't built for that oral experience.
Right.
Whereas when you get into a venue that is smaller, that has that feeling, you not only connect with the audience, but you have a higher quality of art. And they can go back to a lot of acoustic things where other things prior had to be amplified, electrified, that sort of thing. And that they said, we really like to get back to our roots. We like to have, and not exclusively, but as every now and then you just kind of reconnect with, what your heart is and saying and where you need to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're also all hearing the same sounds because in a stadium, they've got their, headphones on and they're hearing it unfiltered, whereas the crowd is hearing it, amplified, echoing, reverberating.
Yes, and over the cheering of everyone else in the crowd or the people singing along or whatever they may be doing. It's like, I came to hear the artist, not my person next to me.
And so one of my wife, Sarah, and I's favorite artists is Tegan and Sarah. And sometimes we've been at shows, and they're not like super popular or anything, but we've been at a show at least once where they were like, guys, please don't sing along because sound travels and you get us all off beat. So, and also you're here to see us. So,
yeah, exactly.
But it gets them off beat, because,
they can. And that I think is an interesting point that so often you wonder whether the artists can hear you, and they very much can. They can hear the reaction. They can hear, and that fuels them. Very often they'll say, we're going to do a good show, but we might give you an even better show if we hear your, screaming for us, yelling for us.
Totally.
Just yell out more cowbell all the time. There
Yes.
We'll go.
Okay. That's great. So what is your prognosis for the future of the arts in Indianapolis over the next
I think it's
5 years?
Really strong. I think there have been times, and times have proven some of my apprehension to be invalid, that we were going to be oversaturated. We were going to be not the quality of or the variety of. And I think if anything, we've shown just the opposite of that. We have continued to grow as a city to have even more support for the arts. It's not easy.
Right.
Few things are, and if it's worth doing, it's worth working for. But there are up and coming, robust artists, and now we're at a point. Maybe once again, maybe it's always been there, but I think there have been more robust times where we are producing a lot of artists who then come back to Indy to show us how they've grown, and that just helps keep us vibrant and vital in the in the arts world.
Yeah.
People hear and think of Indy as a place where things are going on. It's not just where you go to retire. It's where you go to grow and develop. And
Indy 500 or whatever.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's and all those things, I think, contribute to the overall entertainment scene, whether it's sports entertainment or fine arts entertainment, visual, performing, all of the different aspects that go to it. And I think that makes a more rounded city and a more rounded experience. And I think in a lot of ways, even though some people, and literally sometimes you are competing for the same dollar. I've got three activities. I'd like to go to all of them at the same time. Yeah. I can't. I have to choose. But for the most part, they support one another because it keeps the community so diverse and so varied, which was reflective of the population we have here. You know, I mean, it may seem like it's fairly narrow, but I think that's more a perception than a reality. It's really quite a broad spectrum of taste, of interest, of
identities, backgrounds, nationalities, everything. Yeah, it's really the way it's presented to us rather than the reality. And also, Indianapolis, mid-sized cities are great places for those who are marginalized to create their own spaces, right? Yeah. And then, those can take off, right? We've seen that happen. Yeah. And of course, we've had Vernon on the show and the artist that he helped, teach how to paint in prison, Matthew Gunning. And we have the Arte Mexicano in Indiana, Fonseca Du Bois Gallery here. You just saw the work that's and we're going to be doing a workshop this Friday with the artists. Between 6 and 9 p.m. So if anybody out there is interested in meeting the artists and working with the artists, you should come on and stop by anytime. Yeah. And James, it's been great having you on the show. We really appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. Pleasure. It's a great place. Everybody should come by and visit.
Yes. All right. I agree. Endorsement. Okay. All right. Well, after a short break, we will be right back. Welcome back to Naptown People's Radio. I hope that you all learned as much as I did in that discussion with both Akeem and Noah, as well as James. And it is time for the Circle City shout out, but absent Dani, we're going to go right into the event roundup that we have coming up this week. So the Liberation Center on Friday between 6 and 9, Oscar Tolosa, our featured artist, will be here for a workshop. On Saturday, between 2 and 4, we have the second session of our Capital Reading Group. If you miss the first session, that's okay. You can still come. And then on Saturday is, of course, we always have Circle City Sangha in the morning, and Sunday is Emancipatory Emotions at 6 p.m. And you can find out other events at indyliberationcenter.org. And that'll be it for the first episode of Season 2 of Naptown People's Radio. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you benefited from it, please give it a like, pass it on, leave a comment, show us some love at support.naptownpeoplesradio.com. The road ahead is long, but we walk it together. Study with their comrades, build with their community, and always remember, theory without action is paralysis, but action without theory is chaos. Once again, I'm your host, Derek Ford, here with my co-host,
Lucas Lee.
Stay dangerous, stay disciplined, and stay in the struggle.
We say all power to the people. That means that we are our own liberators. We don't depend on nobody else. We depend on ourselves. And we take responsibility for ourselves. And therefore, we step up for our organization. Those that have proven by their actions and their practice that they represent for us. All power to the people and peace.
Collaboration. Like, we act as if there's a scarcity of rights. If gay people get rights, women can't have rights. But that's not true. A victory for one is a victory for all. A dangerous thing, you know? And
you talk about people being fearless in the face of whoever there is. They don't care. To the Liberation Center, I would say, this is what we need.